Name is Osei-Frimpong, and you're watching this week's edition of The Black Athenians. Now, today's topic, I study philosophy. I have a lot of books. That's what I do. I think of ideas and practice, and I think of all of that. And so I spend a lot of my time not correcting people. To be honest, spend a lot of my time not correcting people because it's not worth it. And there's a thing called panel etiquette. If you don't know, I'm going to help you be better in your life. Panel etiquette means if you're on a panel and someone else on that panel gives an idea that's good enough, you let it slide. Right?
Oh, oops.
Yeah, all right, so a lot of people don't know this. Like I say, this is good on dates. This is just like good for something you should know in your life. If someone, like for example, if you're with like 2 or 3 people and someone else comes and asks for directions and someone else gives directions, but they're not quite the most efficient route, but they'll get them there, just let it slide. Panel etiquette means if it's good enough and you're in a group, just let it slide. Now, if they're giving directions and like the directions are bad directions, you have to make an intervention. But panel etiquette means as long as someone gives a good enough answer, let it go, as long as they're not doing harm. And so I've been doing that with pragmatism. People use the word pragmatism and how to be pragmatic with me all the time, and they do it poorly. I've been letting it go, but like now I'm just going to try to clear the whole debate right now. So what people do, like, for example, people look at pragmatic approaches to making black communities whole. Pragmatic approaches. The problem is we've never made black communities whole. So what you think you're doing as a pragmatic approach is just doing what we've been doing and expecting it to end up something different. The last time we got black people justice, it included lots of guns and killing. So if you're a real pragmatist, we'd start there and work over. And with that, hit the beat, Matthew.
To the beat, y'all.
Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I'll paint the White House black and ain't no future in your front.
To the beat, y'all.
Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I'll paint the White House black and ain't no future in your front.
America. So what this episode is about pragmatism. I hope you've rolled in. This is going to be very good and educational. But so I often get talked about how, I mean, what you're doing is good, but it's not very pragmatic. I do pragmatic work. Although I've been kind of freakishly effective in what I'm doing in ways that, like, I don't take a lot of bows, but like I hear my arguments come out of other people's mouths who ostensibly don't like me very much. And that's kind of how I know I'm winning. So I'm just going to kind of keep doing what I'm doing and see how that works out. So pragmatism. The notion that, honestly, we can call it white. Let's set the distinction between white pragmatism and real pragmatism. Now, the pragmatists, the initial American pragmatists, and this is an American school of thought, we're all white, but we're going to talk about the distinction in a moment. The initial pragmatist, a guy named Dewey, Charles Peirce, William James, these guys were all about, like, we need experience and experiments, and we need to figure out, like, what's on the ground and do what works. Not tied to an ideology, that's all just metaphysical mumbo-jumbo. We just need to do what works in practice and figure out what works in practice. They're tied to, like, all right, so let's figure out what works and do that and like, experiment. And it's all very American, can do. We can figure it out through experiments and actually, like, opening our mind and figuring out what works. That's American pragmatism. Now, white pragmatism is all of that except with the big ideological commitment that white people are not psychopaths. They will be persuaded through moral suasion. We can appeal to their reason, right? So, like I said, history has not borne that out. History says the other thing.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you look.
If you look at history, appealing to white people's reason, like we just needed more meetings with the slave owners, and then they would have given up their slaves. We just needed better arguments. That's what the white pragmatist will say. The real pragmatist will say, like, well, according to history, like, we tried everything else. We tried all these compromises. Let's try this kill 200,000 white Confederate thing. That worked. Right? So if you're a real pragmatist, you have to be honest with the fact that the talking didn't work. Turns out talking to bigoted white people didn't work. We got justice. Black people were free when we started killing them. Like, that's just what a pragmatist will, like, look at. Yes.
So I have to interject because we need you to say something that doesn't sound like you're saying kill them.
I don't think we should kill white people. I think we should be honest with the fact that the last time black people were made free, it involved killing white people. And then go from there and figure out preferably a way that we could get justice and freedom without killing white people, without taking killing white people off the table just because I am a committed pragmatist. Like, I think the ideological commitment away from killing white people is just not how black people have ever gotten to justice. So, like, what we want to do is get to justice without killing white people, but not be naive enough to think...
Make it not an option.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Right. And as soon as you make it not an option, you're just not being honest with history.
And
you're being irresponsible.
I'm watching my security clearances go away.
Yeah, like, you're just not being responsible. Like, so a real pragmatist looks at what has worked and starts from there. You don't look at what you wanted to work and start from there, or like what you wish would work would start from there. You look from what actually worked and start from there. So what's it going to mean to make black communities whole? Like, Jim Crow wasn't fixed by asking white people to be better. We needed to start starving their resources. Like, schools, like, if you look at the school desegregation, it didn't happen with Brown v. Board. It happened with something called the ESEA. Can't remember the title, but it's pretty much, it was tying federal dollars to desegregation. And so ESEA, Secondary School Act, something like that. But the moment we started tying federal dollars to desegregation, then all of a sudden local judges started changing their minds about... Like,
you mean they wanted money?
Yeah, like local school districts and local judges started changing their mind about like desegregation. And like, it wasn't the 1954 verdict, it was the 1960s legislation that changed people's minds. So what actually worked wasn't what we like to think worked. And you have, if you're a committed pragmatist, you know that. All right, so Matthew's back, by the way. I like Matthew being back. And if you like Matthew being back, I need you to go to thefunkyacademic.com and sign up for a $5, $15, or $50 a month donation. Or you can just give a one-time huge donation, whatever you like, whatever you flavor. I like the monthlies because that way I can budget. I also like to pay Matthew because Matthew does very good work for me, and I think that's very important. And in order to pay him, I need you to go to thefunkyacademic.com and sign up for a membership. Plus, I think I give a service here, and if you think I give a valuable service, a lot of my discretionary income goes to this quality of programming because I think I'm going to end up cutting up these videos and giving them to my kids when I die. So I'm right now preparing my legacy. They're not going to get much money because doing this has kind of cut me out of the private labor market in a way that is not negligible. However, I think my legacy will be like these kind of videos, and they will see their dad actually doing the quality of work that needs to be done. So if you support the work that I'm doing, go over to thefunkyacademic.com and give $5, $15, or $50 a month so I can pay Matthew and keep the lights on and all of that. And now I'm going to give some directions to Matthew. Matthew, go and get a picture of Obama's speeches. Obama giving speeches. I think he gave 3 speeches for $1.2 million. Wall Street speeches. Yeah. Wall Street speeches post-presidency. Just get like an article headline from that. Okay. All right. So
I spoke Tuesday, didn't make any money.
You did not make a dime. I did not get speaking fees. I'm asking you to donate your speaking fees because I think I deserve one. So what I'm telling you is that the real pragmatists will look at what works and design their program based on what's worked in the past. The problem is, if you're doing something like racial justice in America, we haven't ever done it successfully. So anyone who's tied to the contemporary ways of doing things is tied to a 400-year project of failure. So whatever it is that brings about black communities' wholeness will not look like what we've done before.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's the idea that, we're going to do things the exact same way we've always done. The same people. Just make minor tweaks. I mean, I think we technically call that insanity.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a definition of insanity. Doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. So, well, right now we do the same thing and call it pragmatism. When the last thing that worked was force and starvation, was taking the war to white people. The last thing that actually worked was taking the war to white people.
And that was on our 5th president.
That was, yeah.
Since then.
The taking the war to white people. Like that was it. Not, yeah. And so you'll get all of these people who say like, well, you got to be pragmatic and like try to deal within the system, not understanding that the system is organized and it's working very well in maintaining the racial hierarchy. So whatever it is that's going to work into the future is going to be highly offensive to people who are invested in the status quo, even if they don't admit that they have investments in the status quo. Right? Am I speaking any lies?
No lies detected.
No. If we had a record of doing this well, if we had a record of like a series of middle-class black communities that are like largely black and largely middle class and stable, we could say like we can just do what they do. But pretty much, that's not the case in America. That's not the case. It's like apparently, depending on who you talk to, Prince George's County, which is shot through with government jobs, so like the private market didn't really have to do that. And even that, Prince George's County, those kids have student loans that they're not talking about, and then their houses went underwater, and they don't talk about that either.
And one of my cousins pointed something out to me recently, talking about the family in PG. PG County is a
black middle class.
Black middle class county. It's also the poorest county surrounding the District of Columbia.
So even our black middle class is like
the poorest people.
Like if you talk to people in other counties,
Montgomery,
Chase,
Montgomery,
about living in PG, they'll say like,
no, like I mean, and I realize we've always done that. Like we used to joke as growing up in DC that PG County's cops quote was "bang bang, stop or I'll shoot."
And this is the black, and like, let's be honest, I lived my first, up until 6th grade, I lived in Baldwin Hills, California. You talk about Baldwin Hills, California to people who aren't from Baldwin Hills, California, they'll be like, ooh, Baldwin Hills, California.
Didn't BET give them a show?
They gave them a show, because that's where the black money is. Let me tell you about Baldwin Hills, California, people. First of all, it's not as black as it used to be. 1. 2, it only became black because like when black people started moving there, white people moved out. And 3, like my mom was a nurse. My mom was a nurse.
And so the moment that white people decided they needed a place to live again, you're saying we got the shaft.
Yeah, I'm just saying that like it wasn't like, don't talk to me about, it wasn't like black ballers. It was my mom being a single nurse with one income, being able to afford a house. I think they paid $44,000 for it in 1970, whatever. And so like so if that's what like black upper class, black real money. My mom was a single nurse.
Yeah.
So that's as good as we get. You don't want me being as good as, because white money does not look like a single nurse. I will tell you that right now.
Well, even in a single nurse, as I think about it, it's still dressed so different.
I know white single nurses, and they're looked down upon by their other white family. If you're a black single nurse, like
you're paying the rest of the family's bills,
holding it down.
Yeah.
So like there's a difference. So I want to clarify that.
God.
And for people who don't know and are just watching, go ahead and put the wealth, the wealth picture up. So I want to reiterate, pragmatism, when you've never actually achieved the end, it's going to look like wild experimentation. It's going to look like things that have never been done before because we've never done this before. And so right now you're looking at the median wealth breakdown. Thanks, Matthew, for making it big. White people, these are making a handful of adjustments. These numbers are printed in Forbes magazine, but they come from a series of papers that a guy named Edward Wolf, Edward Wolf? It's either Edward Wolf? Yeah, at NYU puts together. He's a wealth economist, and he's been doing this study every 10 years. And right now, if you make a handful of adjustments, or this was the last time it came out was 2013, if you make a handful of adjustments, black people, their median wealth, that's the middle black person, the black person you see on the street, what they have is about $1,700. Whereas what the white median wealth, median household, what they have is about $117,000.
Yeah, know the difference between 1,700 and 100 plus 1,000.
Right? So the problem, notice the white medians are arcing up or projected high, and the black ones are projected low. We're looking to actually go down to $1,200 by 2024. So not only is there a discrepancy, but the projections are going different ways, which means by every definition, there are two different Americas, at least two different Americas. And I will tell you right now, the problem with inequality isn't necessarily the inequality, it's the predatory conditions such inequality sets up. So you have to understand that it's not just that white households are high and going higher and black households are lower going lower. It's that white households are high and going higher because black households are low and going lower. It's a predatory quality. It's that a white 28-year-old gets to use that inheritance to buy up at a discount rate the black 28-year-olds who now have to sell their family's house because the black baby boomer's grandparent died. Right?
Yeah.
And nobody can keep up with the taxes, so they have to sell it below market rate to pay all of the descendants, right? And so that's how the quality of inequality sets up predatory conditions. And now you can't get a political support for to keep the black people in that house because now all of the 28-year-old white people have a material incentive to create a market that makes desperate black people, right? So the inequality isn't bad because it's of the inequality simpliciter. That means inequality without qualification. The inequality is bad because it sets up predatory conditions, right? So, and this graph is also important because you have to understand that real wealth isn't what's in your individual income. It's in what's in your community's income. It's in the bank accounts of everyone who was at your wedding. And black people, we can't even afford to get married. So
yeah, no.
Yeah.
I watch these shows occasionally that are about these weddings. I'm like, or these sweet 16 birthday parties. I was like, really? You got a cake?
That's not our love. And if you get a cake, we're going into debt for it. Whereas white people just pay cash. So and then we get their ideas. That's a lot of black people don't know what it's like be honest about what it is to be black because all of our media is controlled by people who aren't black or want to sell us an idea of America that's raceless, which means white, and it's definitely not black. And so we have ideas that don't come from us and are not about us, and then end up with confused. A lot of people are confused.
I heard a ad on the way over here that the guy was like, remember, anyone can be a millionaire. Don't assume that or we make the assumption that every millionaire had a head start. And I'm like, well, most of them did.
If you look at what makes good entrepreneurs, apparently isn't some special gene for risk. It's coming from money.
Yeah, having that $100,000 million loan from your daddy certainly.
Or being able to use your parents' credit. That's the same thing. Having a cosigner,
which is completely different to my upbringing because I had to worry about my parents using my credit.
Right.
Like, they put bills in the name because that was what they needed to do in order to keep utilities on.
There's this great, Frances Cress Wrestling wrote the ISIS papers, and I was going over them last week, and there's this great, she starts out saying, like, look, all right, so you got these drugs in the black community, and you got these guns in the black community, but you know what I've never seen in the black community? A gun factory or like a serious chemical lab, which makes me think, who's putting these guns in the black community and who's making these drugs that are like now paralyzing the black community? She wrote this in the 80s, and it's not us. So if you think there's a plot against the black community, we didn't come up with these things ourselves. Like, we didn't drop, and this is apparent. This is very, very, very relevant if you talk about like African politics, where you got one side fighting with Kalashnikovs and the other side fighting with M16s. Yeah. And like, they don't make guns in Africa. Yeah. Like, they don't make the M16s. Like, so like, you got all these proxy war guns that is just kind of left over, and like warlords fighting with American and Russian made weapons. And that's, now you got the Chinese involved, but I can do a whole nother show on that. We're talking about pragmatism and the misuses of pragmatism when we're really committed to the status quo. And I call it white pragmatism, but it's also people with white aspiration pragmatism. And this is important because the most high-level pragmatist in the last 10 years the most high-level guy who self-styled himself as a pragmatist was a cat named Barack Obama. Barack Obama called himself a pragmatist many times. Well, I just got to do what's pragmatic. But really, what he was doing was work that was legislation in a way that didn't jeopardize making money for white people. Like, he said this in the Correspondents' Dinner. You're going to have to find the clip. It's unfortunate. I'm going to put it in the memo. I'm going to put the clip of the Correspondents' Dinner where he says, like, well, I'm trying out these jokes because in a few years I want to see if they're going to work for the Goldman Sachs crowd. Yeah. And so he made that joke in like 2016, and everyone laughed. He kept his face straight. He was just saying. And now, Matthew, give him the. It turns out he made put it all the way down so people could see. He made $1.2 million giving 3 speeches to Wall Street last year. Not that. Those weren't just last year. Those are just 3 speeches. Can you put it more in the center? Somehow the top's getting. Okay. Yeah. $1.2 million giving 3 speeches. So yeah, his pragmatism in government was always with an eye towards being a billionaire after government. So this wasn't an ideological commitment to pragmatism. This was an ideological commitment to pragmatism with the big condition that I'm not going to do anything that's going to jeopardize my after work.
You mean those book deals? They're both getting.
And I'm a pragmatist, but I have the big condition that I'm not going to do anything that's going to make Michelle that upset. So that's a hard line in your pragmatism. So you're not really a pragmatist. So all these people who will tell you that, especially these white people, who will tell you that, well, you got to be pragmatic in your struggle for black justice. No, they're telling you that because they don't want to tick off their white friend to jeopardize their white job. So it's pragmatism with the big condition that I got to, I can't make me look bad. Or I can't be seen supporting you if you're going to be doing your work in a way that jeopardizes my business connections. So that's what that pragmatism means. So when you talk to white pragmatists, that's what they're actually talking about. Pragmatists who are trying to work within the system. And I'm just being honest. We need to be pragmatists. Insofar as we are going to be pragmatists, we need to start with the last thing that worked. And considering that we've never actually made black communities whole, that means we need to be open to everything. With starting the last time black people made a huge leap toward justice involved, killing 200,000 white people. So we need to start with the understanding that moral suasion only has a record of failure in the United States. So start with that understanding and work backwards. right? That's what a responsible pragmatist will say. A responsible pragmatist won't say, well, we know we got to make sure that white people want to work with us. A responsible pragmatist will say, like, this only works when white people don't want to work with us. And we do what we need to do regardless of whether they want to work. We do what
whether they're going to be happy when we're done
to them.
Yeah.
We need, and like a lot of people take that and say, like, well, we just need to do it on our own. No, we need to take the fight to them.
You know, the do it on your own argument always confuses me because, I'm like, let's look at the numbers.
We don't have assets.
And people act like we haven't tried.
Right.
Like, if you can look at history and see where we tried
to do it on our own, and it doesn't work because we don't have assets. And they control the guns.
Yeah.
So, like, any black institution in these United States that's survived in these United States has survived because white institutions have let them. So, and I'm looking at you, the church. I'm looking at you, somewhat the NAACP. In the Urban League. Any black institution in these I'm looking at you, Nation of Islam. Because, like, you survived, and I know you got those federal contracts doing security. So you've survived because you don't take the fight to white people. You've survived as an institution of Negro control. And when your Negro control looks like telling black people they can do it on their own without taking the fight to white people. Yes.
I mean, like, it's such a strange concept of not doing that when you really look at it, is that, like, we can't sit back. We don't control enough. We're on a large enough portion of the population.
No.
At 13%, like, I have friends who are like, you know, all white, who are like, you know, I support black people. Well, you should get guns. And I'm like, okay, by sheer volume of numbers, I lose that fight.
We lose that fight. Well, we're not trained to kill white people. Look, like that's a big deal because white cops are trained to kill black people and black people are trained to kill black. There's a great essay by Bobby Wright. Get me the name. It's like the psychopathology of race. The psychopathic racial personality. It's a little essay. It's only 8 pages, maybe 10 pages long. It's a little essay, but it's got so much in it. I might do a whole show on that essay.
I have to read that.
Yeah, it's 8 pages long. It's wonderful. By Bobby Wright. He's a PhD from University of Chicago, black guy, and a psychologist. And he just pretty much says, look, the psychopathic racial personality and other essays. The other essays are great too. But like, read the psychopathology, the psychopathic racial personality. It's a fantastic essay by Bobby Wright. And he's like, look, you can't assume white people are culturally, morally developed, or ethically and morally developed so that they'll listen to moral persuasion. Like, that's just not where they're at.
Where's it happened?
Where it's never happened. It's never happened, and that's not where they're at. We don't have the institutions to ethically and culturally develop white people. So, like, they're developed into psychopaths. Where race is available, where race is the variable. You can't expect them to act ethically towards black communities. They are developed into psychopaths, where race is the variable, and that's what an honest look at history will tell us. They don't respect our rights. They don't respect our dignities. They don't respect our life. Like, that's just not how they've been developed. And
we're not actively trying to develop a different type either. Whether anyone, like, if you look at our schools.
No, we're not. No, we develop white psychopaths where race is the variable. And we need to start from there. And I think that's an honest place to start. Because there is no discontinuity between, for example, white institutions and white racism, white supremacy. Like, white supremacists and their churches get along very well. And white supremacists become white supremacists through their churches. So, so if we start, the pragmatic person's going to look at the fact of white pathology when race is the variable and start from there. We just need to be honest about that. And he says, like, look, and since they have so much power, black institutions have had to become white supremacists in order to survive, right? And that's going to be a problem. But That's just going to be a fact of the state of play. So what we do is when we look at black-on-black violence, we need to understand that black-on-black violence is the only violence we've been trained to express. We don't have experience killing white people. And the people who did have experience killing white people, the World War II veterans, they came back, and that's how we got the civil rights movement. Yeah. Like Robert F. Williams, because these guys were used to killing white people. And that gave them the edge in the fight in these United States. So
we have a problem even upsetting them currently.
Yeah, we're not used to upsetting. We're not experienced and used to even upsetting white people. So the idea that black people only are violent toward themselves, that's just a matter of practice. We need to practice, and upsetting white people is a skill that I've honed and I'm trying to transmit to you because it takes practice. Like, you need to be training your kids on how to upset white supremacy, how to fight white people. Like, what have you taught your sons and daughters about how to take apart white supremacy today? That's why I do these videos. This is my legacy. Once again, if you want to support that legacy, go to thefunkyacademic.com because the legacy doesn't pay for itself. But I want you to know that not to be fooled by white people who tell you they're pragmatists doing something that's never been done. Because when you're doing something that's never been done, all options have to be open, not just the options that don't jeopardize your check. Not just the options that keep your white friends happy. Not just the options that keep you in a job. All options have to be open because we've never done this before. And what it looks like to get from here to justice, what it looks like to get from here to black communities being whole, is not going to look like the last 30 years. It's not going to look like the Obama presidency.
No. And the other thing that I recently started asking people is find another group in the world that fits the way descendants of slaves have been. Oh. We don't have another group that was fully in the slavery. People are like, oh, they've been slaves since blah blah blah. Yeah, but slavery was different. Yeah, you could buy your freedom. Yeah. Under in Greece under their slave system.
And you can say, well, Jewish people are slaves. Yeah, but they're white now. So, like they were white in Europe, and like they got kicked out of Europe for having too much money. That was not our problem here in the United States.
No.
And like if people say like, well, just do what the Asians do and the Indians do. First of all, you don't meet the Asians and the Indians. You don't even meet the Cambodians. Filipinos. You meet the Chinese. And since 1960,
Chinese and Japanese.
And some Koreans. Right? So like since what was the year? Since 1965? 65? Yeah. Yeah, 65, yeah. 1965, since the Immigration Act, like when they started doing when they started actually documenting these things in the 70s, 50% of Chinese immigrants, 50% of Chinese immigrants have themselves a college degree.
Yeah, well, and
50% have a college degree. Now, guess what the degrees of the percentage of college degree Chinese national is? 2%.
Yeah, and that's
so 50% of the immigrants have a college degree. Only 2% of the
Chinese nationals.
So what Chinese nationals do? So what the Chinese have done is leave their poor people at home.
Yeah,
like we don't. And it's the same with the Indians. When the Indians who come here aren't the untouchables. Yes. Like they're still in India. Yeah. Like the Indians we meet in the United States are not the Indians. No, the Indians are in India. The Indians we meet in the United States are one who fled from like
and fled with money.
And fled with money.
Like let's.
Yeah. You're meeting the in-group.
Well, like, I have friends that are Cuban, right. And if you talk to them, Cuba is a great example.
Cuba's a great example, too.
American Cubans fled Cuba because they wanted to keep their money and were scared that Castro...
We the worst Cubans in the United States.
Yeah, that Castro was going to make them share it with everyone else. Right. Yeah, with darker skin. Yeah, and black Cubans.
No, white Cubans in the United States are like the most awful ones.
Next to maybe Spaniards.
Yeah, they're the
next
ones,
to the Europeans, Hispanic.
Like they're the ones who came here. Like you got to understand that before the Cuban Revolution, black people were like, they weren't chattel slaves, but they weren't doing so well. They were like sharecroppers. They were in the fields picking all the sugar, all that delicious sugar. So the black Cubans have a very complicated relationship with Castro because like. Sure, there was some stuff going on, but
it was better than what they were.
It was
they were
better,
for.
like uniformly for black Cubans, better than like the Batista and pre-revolution for black Cubans. So when you talk to like white Cubanos in the United States, they are not.
No,
they are not.
There's no honesty. There's no honesty about the situation.
No.
And, even as I meet younger generations of them, there's no honesty. It's not like they've later gone back and gone, okay, maybe.
My grandpa was Yeah,
no, they're like, no, my grandma was poor. I'm like,
she got on a boat and came here. Like, no.
Your grandma owned 2 houses.
And the problem was, like, Castro wanted to take one of those houses.
Yeah. No, she came here and still owned 2 houses. I mean, she came here and still bought 2 houses.
So she came here with jewels.
Yeah.
She got all the family jewels and got on a boat and turned those jewels into real estate.
Yes, my family jewels are memories. Yeah. They have no financial benefit whatsoever.
So don't try to compare us with it's like trying to compare black people with NBA stars.
What
that's what it's like to try to compare like Asians with like the Chinese people you happen to meet. Because you don't meet the Laotians.
No, they don't let them
from Cambodia.
Yeah,
they're broke in Minneapolis somewhere. Like the refugees, the legit refugees. Yeah.
And broken Minneapolis somewhere is, for them, that's still a big difference than just everybody else. Yeah,
they're still in Laos. Yeah. Like in Vietnam, they still have unexploded mines that they're like dancing around. I think they're a good amount.
That were not theirs. Let's be clear; those were ours. We left them there.
Yeah, well, they weren't produced
there.
Yeah, they were produced in Russia. They were produced in Russia or China or in the U.S. They definitely weren't produced in Vietnam, but they're still there, just hanging out. Don't go into that field because there might be mines.
Well, it was funny because I was reading an article about a woman who adopted black kids. And someone came to her and said, here's how, make sure they're immersed in their culture. Right. And, as I'm reading through the article, I realized that she actually adopted African kids. And I was like, oh, hold on. Yeah.
If you want to adopt a black kid in Mississippi, they're there. You got extras.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah.
It's not like a phone book with a paperwork. It's like a form.
Yeah. And not even always a form. I mean, you can just let them move in and eventually the hospitals will recognize you as their parent.
Community property, like common law adoptions.
Yeah. I mean,
living with you for long enough that you can just have them.
Yeah. It's a big difference in paperwork. I won't lie to you. Yeah. But she was talking about that, and I was like, oh no, that's really still a difference. Yeah. But they were talking about how much cheaper it is to adopt black kids, and I'm like, you're still using the term very differently. Than it's also even cheaper to adopt descendants of slaves.
Yeah. So
at least on the adoption side, it may cost you more in bills later.
Therapy. So I'm going to let you go, but first I just want to reiterate, pragmatism is looking at what works. It's not looking at what you want to work. It's not looking at what would be convenient to work. It's about looking at what works and trying different things out at what's effective. Not what you want to be effective, what would be really convenient for you to be effective, what you'd like to be effective. And the truth is, in terms of racial justice, what's effective isn't going to look like what's comfortable for any of the white liberals you like. So
I don't like any right now. So
there you go. So be honest about what when you say I'm being pragmatic, what that means. That usually means you're doing the best you can in a way that still keeps your job and keeps your people happy. When really being pragmatic might end up pissing off all of them. It might mean making you irrelevant.
I would really like to see people have the will to do that.
Well, but that's what's going to take. And you have to be honest about pragmatism when we've never actually made black communities whole.
Yeah.
So don't talk to me about like pragmatism and you're so comfortable in your approach when we're doing something that's never been done. So you're comfortable in your approach because you're comfortable in the approach that will secure you your wealth or your honor or whatever. Not necessarily the approach that will secure black communities, good jobs at fair wages, because we've never done that. We've never done that. So you don't know what you're basing off of. And the closest thing we've come to that involved lots of guns, Reconstruction. It involved like military.
Burning Atlanta.
Yeah, burning Atlanta. Yeah. It involved a lot of white death and definitely a lot of white people in their feelings. So if you want to try to do this without white death or without white people in their feelings, you're not serious about this life. You have to keep that on the table if you're serious about being free. It's a revolutionary project. It's like trying to say okay, so I want to be an American revolutionary, but can we do it with just meetings with the king? Can we do it with I want to be free, but maybe instead of this Declaration of Independence, the suicide pact at the bottom, could we just ask nicely and maybe negotiate? No, it was always if we were going to be free, it was going to come with guns and ships.
Yeah.
So let's be honest about what our commitment to freedom looks like for black communities and making them whole. Because if we're not, I got a lot of donations. Good. Thank you for the people who are giving me. And share this video to all your friends because I need a bigger audience. And my bigger audience comes from you creating a bigger audience for me. So thank you for your time. And I'm going to go. Peace.